Welcome to Sewing with Nancy. This program features sumptuous projects centering around the title of Victorian Roses, designed and created by Jenny Haskins, author of the book Victorian Roses. Jenny calls Australia her home and is currently inspiring sewing enthusiasts in the U.S. I've been fortunate to learn from her these past 2 days, and now you too can do the same. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a real pleasure to be here with you, and I look forward to sharing my creative design secrets with fellow sewers of America.
Our first project is a romantic pillow featuring a tantalizing combination of fabrics, trims, and stitching. You can learn the techniques as you go and complete the pillow in a couple of sewing sessions by using Jenny's inspiring ideas. That's what's next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's how-to sewing program with Nancy Zieman, is being brought to you by PFAFF, the largest European producer of sewing machines. PFAFF's creative line of sewing machines and hobby lock sergers are simply the best. Ginger, a tradition of quality in scissors and shears for home, classroom, and industry. Ginger scissors and shears are the choice of professionals. Madeira thread from Germany with superior quality and smart packaging to make it a sensational value, preferred by home and professional embroiderers everywhere. Oxmoor House, the publisher of innovative sewing, quilting, and craft books, including books by Nancy Zieman. Prim Dritz, the source for sewing and quilting notions, including products by Dritz, Collins, and Omnigrid. Amazing Designs by Great Notions, your complete source for machine embroidery. Over 200 embroidery pack collections currently available, including designs by Nancy Zieman. And Nancy's Notions catalog, featuring specialty sewing books and unique, hard-to-find sewing notions and supplies.
To begin our lesson on sewing and quilting, we're going to start with Jenny's premise, and that is working with color. Jenny, you say color is the most important part for you.
Yes, it is. It's what motivates me, what inspires me, and I think that if you have your colours correct, you can work with anything. So choosing your fabrics and your threads is very, very important, and it's worth taking time with.
You've chosen 3 fabrics that coordinate together, and then after you've chosen the fabrics, then you work with the thread.
That's exactly right. Remember, artists design fabrics. So if you can exactly match your thread colours to your fabrics, then you know that your colour's going to coordinate. And one other thing is less and best. Less is best. We do not have 300 colours in here, so you work with a limited palette.
So we have some color combinations here. You're going to see some other color combinations as we go along, but you'll notice these muted, beautiful colors throughout the series. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to start with a romantic pillow or cushion, as Jenny calls it in Australia. And we'll soon see, or you'll soon see, how the elements just kind of pull everything together, from the transfer, the lace, the silk dupioni, beautiful fabric that has pin tucked, as well as some antique trim around the very edges. We'll show you some other lace options. This looks difficult, and it isn't.
No, it's very simple.
I like your thought that you told me about sewing. If it isn't easy,
you shouldn't do it.
So we are making a pillow or a cushion that's about 16 inches square, that's the size of the pillow, and the main focus point is a transfer. And you have this transfer placed on the center of the cushion with an interesting fabric or an interesting batting.
Again, it's ease of use. This is a fusible batting that fuses to our print. And as it doesn't have fusible batting on the other side, we've put a double-sided fusible web, so the whole 3 layers fuse together and then come down onto our silk.
Then after doing the positioning and pressing, you do the stitching. And this is not necessarily difficult. This is a very narrow satin stitch.
Yes, this project is done so that a very basic machine can do it.
So we have just positioned part of it so that you would simply stitch around the entire transfer or whatever you are highlighting in the center of your pillow or cushion. But now the lace positioning. I like this technique. I learned this from you and I really appreciate it, so I know you will appreciate it as well. And that's working with lace motifs and how to position them. I wish I knew that when I did a bridal program. This would have worked out really well, Jenny. Here's your sandwich.
Yes, just like a quilt.
And this is paper, just...
Yep, any sort of paper.
And then you place your lace motif wrong side up.
Yes.
And then this is the paperback fusible web, or the double-sided web. And then you want to press that?
Just press it all together. And the one thing you must remember is that it is a steam and heat bond. So you need plenty of steam and heat to make the bond active.
And we'll let this dry. We already have one that has been pressed thoroughly, and you don't have to use this motif just in this shape. Watch Jenny perform some magic on this lace.
Well, why we do this is because as you peel the paper off, you then have your lace piece and all the excess batting stays on the paper. So it is just a matter, you don't have to cut it out. Any excess pieces you just pull away. Now, I have one piece here, and I want you to see it as one piece. So that's how my motif was. The secret is to come and clip it apart at what I call the little lace jump stitches. And then you have no unravelling. So you'd clip that. Don't be afraid also to clip the motif apart if you want to do sharp corners. Now I have one here that we have clipped apart so that you can see, here I can pop this one here. Then I have my single flower. Remember, you are the artist, so that you can create any design you like, work in odd numbers, and here we are, we're going round the corner. I always like one side longer than the other, and again, remember, we are covering up a section. Any small flowers that you have, it is important to cut these jump stitches away so that they look like you have actually embroidered them in place.
And then after we would finish satin stitching around the edge, you would steam these down into place. On your pillow, you did not do the actual machine stitching, but you could use monofilament thread. I just found it now, and to tack it down if you wanted to for permanency. But that's the paperback fusible web will hold it
We'll hold it in place, yes.
Next, we're going to talk about piping, and you'll see a lot of piping in today's projects. And here we have some piping made of the silk du peony. You have a good philosophy on piping.
Yes, use your zipper foot and make sure, if you're lucky enough to have a machine with needle positions, that you actually use one needle position further away from the piping than you need to when you insert it. Then when you insert it, you move over that one more position.
And piping hides, as you say, a multitude of sins.
Yes.
Little corners can be camouflaged, and so we have the piping all the way around the edges. Then some brocade or tapestry could be used, and a strip quilting technique just by applying it to get the flanges along the sides. And now we're going to talk about working with the lace and mitering those corners. The trim on that original fabric, or original pillow, excuse me, had beautiful mitered corners, and we'll set up our samples. This is lovely trim. And Jenny, I think here we have our extra piece of lace so that you can show our friends at home how this works.
Now the important thing is when you're doing it not to be afraid of mitered corners, as I was. So always overlap your lace so that it overlaps. I've got to get my corners in the right place.
There we go.
This one's upside down, but it'll work. Overlap your lace so that it's the same overlap as the width. Now to get a perfect right angle, you turn your lace back, and this gives you a perfect square. So that this is straight back here. Make sure that these align and that your edges are the same, and then you just top stitch it down.
Now we have
Here it is.
Finished. And we'll show this to you, how you have achieved this beautiful square corner. And then you would trim away the extra laces, but save those.
Yes.
Because there are some little motifs here that could possibly be used in a future project, and you'll see interesting projects that we can use or you have made that you could use these trims for later. Then this trim is simply top stitched or applied to the flange area. We'll take one last look of this Victorian pillow to show you that how the lace or trim is stitched around the very edge next to the piping, and then the backing is cut the finished size of the pillow, and then top stitch the two areas together next to the piping so that the pillow fits in there very snugly, and you have the beautiful flanges on the side. This probably took an evening, possibly two of enjoyment to create, and you can enjoy it by looking at it for a long time.
An hour easy done. The next Victorian rose technique features an antique tablecloth from my private collection. I embroidered the centre of it around an inserted oval doily that I have. You may choose to do the same or make your tablecloth from scratch. Either way, the results will be exquisite.
Jenny, this tablecloth makes me want to go home and just sew, because I do have some antique doilies, and I could just envision them enhanced with roses or whatever color or other flower I'd like. Let's take a closer look at this center section. This is where you started.
That's exactly right. And so many people have told me they have this collection of doilies sitting in the cupboard and don't know what to do with them.
You heavily starched the doily.
Yes, it needs, as it's very filigree, it needs to be very stable so that when you apply it as well as the cloth, you're not going to get puckers once you machine around it.
I want you to take a special notice, though, of how part of the tablecloth has been trimmed away, and then part of it, of course, is still in view. If we look on the underside, you can see that Jenny did a lot of straight stitching with a short stitch length,
Yes.
and then did the trimming around the edges to remove the excess tablecloth. Now we're going to show you some smaller napkins. I had some napkins that I don't use because I have to press them after each use and launder them. And you can see that these were part of my grandmother's collection, and they're kind of precious to me, and I'm glad I'm going to have a reason to use them. And I'm pulling out just some doilies that I have, and they needed to be mended a little bit, as you can see, or you could put, when you add the embroidery, they will be enhanced. You can put it on the angle. And here we have one that we started, Jenny.
Beautiful tattered one.
And we have done some straight stitching, and I'll flip this to the underside, and you can kind of see the shadow, the white on white, some of the, just the tiny stitching around the edges. And then be patient.
Very patient.
And we're going to use an applique scissors and bevel the edges and do the trimming. And this is where at an angle isn't my best treatment, but I can cut away and lift that fabric around the very edges. And you can see what an attractive centerpiece this would make, and then further enhance it with some machine embroidery. Let's take a quick look at the embroidery because your use of color is important.
Again, in everything that you do, you pick out your colours. And as I explained just recently, and we were talking about, we have taken the colour of the roses into the leaves. All nature isn't just green on green.
Very lovely. And then one other quick little use of a doily. Let's take a look at Jenny's jacket. You can see the doily around the collar, and she chose an antique collar made of course, lace, and positioned it under the shawl collar, and then this extra little addition. Jenny, you bought this at an antique market?
Yes, I did. And sometimes that's where I get my favourite treasures. You've got to do a bit of rummaging, but they're there.
So whether you have a collection at home or you enjoy doing some rummaging at antique shops, you can add beautiful Victorian touches to your garments or to your home decor. Now you're in store for a treat, a showcase of Jenny's projects to give you further inspiration to sew charming Victorian rose creations.
Victorian ladies were known for their exquisite hand embroidery, whiling away their many leisure hours. Today these hours are in short supply, yet we still love the look of the Victorian era. The placemat and tea cosy are made with matching fabric to form a Victorian set. Notice the dimensional embroidered roses that highlight both projects. You know, today we don't have the time, of course, that they had, but we still want instant gratification.
No Victorian table was complete without a table runner, created by Jane Nesbitt, who drew on her exceptional talents with the sewing machine. The results are breathtaking and exhibit a wonderful way to play with stitches, lace motifs, and a Victorian print. Again, the sewing time is very limited, so you can create and enjoy it in a very short period of time.
How inventive, opulent and totally marvellous to have an exquisite necklace that is a purse also. It is ideal for keeping your business cards at a show, sewing essentials, small bottles of perfume that nobody will be without, close at hand when you need them, when a large purse is not necessary, and it also looks beautiful to wear. This Victorian opera bag is the ultimate in style and simplicity, proving that it doesn't have to be difficult to look absolutely magnificent, and reaffirming the tactum, work smarter, not harder. Make it from remnants or a hoarded treasure scrap you never really knew what to do with, and it is a personal favourite of mine.
This is a great project to put together and requires really a small amount of fabric.
Yes, it does.
But Jenny, let's look at your finished opera bag, because this fabric around the edge is not your everyday run-of-the-mill fabric.
No, it's to drop dead to die for.
You have a skirt out of this, you were telling
Yes,
me.
it's my leftover piece.
And then the center section has crushed velvet with a machine embroidery, some of the motifs left over from the lace. Or if you did not have a machine to do the embroidery, you could simply use appliques, whatever
Yes.
you'd like as a little extra accent in the center. Some gold trim,
Yes.
and then we have a lining fabric inside, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
The main size of this fabric, both the lining and the fashion fabric, will be 9 inches wide by 30 inches long, and all these details and instructions are in the book that accompanies this program. But since we did not use your very expensive fabric for this sample, we kind of created a look of elegance by doing some strip piecing.
I thought this was fun because we wanted to get the same sort of colour tones but without making it too bright. So in strip piecing the fabrics, which are just gorgeous, I've fallen in love with them, we then strip pieced it, cut it to suit, and then covered the seams with a braid.
With a narrow braid, and you use black thread to stitch it down. You could use a zigzag stitch. This happens to be a little cross stitch pattern.
Yes.
So you can see that little look of elegance in this area. These strips are 3 inches wide, so you'd piece these together so that, again, this measured 9 inches by 30 inches, and then meet wrong sides together.
That's right, because we do our lining and the top of our bag together.
Just envision this a little bit longer, this top piece, but it would be 9 by 30, then gathering both long edges with a gathering basting stitch, however you prefer to do this. And this is kind of where we are in this next sample.
Yes, we have gathered it up, and you will notice that maybe, Nancy, we can have a look at the
Sure.
bag, because the bag extends and has a casing at the end so that you can extend it open and gather it up with a piece of ribbon.
And let's just show that ribbon so you can get the idea of that great closure. Isn't that fun?
So we have to create the closure, and you clip in at the ends so that we have done it here. Turn under a hem first, turn over another hem, fold it down and stitch it to create your casing.
And here the casing has been stitched, and you would thread the ribbon through this area.
Yes.
Now we're going to combine a little bit of sewing and a little glue.
A little glue.
A
yes.
very little.
I know it's your favourite. That's okay. Here is our cardboard shape, and we have to cut 4 of these. We then have 2 of them have batting on top, which you can use a spray glue to put in place. A little spray glue on here again to centre your fabric, and then all we're going to do is clip the edges and pull it to the underside and glue it down.
A little bit will go a long way.
Oh yes, we learnt that, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
This side's padded, and our lining piece does not have padding, so that we have 2 plain and 2 padded.
Now you can buy gold trim, as you can see here, that has the seam allowances attached, but then you can unattach the seam allowances so that it can be used as the handle of the opera bag. And so we'll just show you how this is kind of...
Just glued underneath there, like that.
And there is definite instructions exactly how long to make the handle and the trim to go together. I'm just going to point out, Jenny, how that you have so cleverly, I think it's right in there if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
intertwined the 2 end pieces together. If you really didn't notice, you would, I'm just looking for it, I can see it, but
Yes.
how you can meld the 2 pieces together very easily. The lining piece then, of course, is tucked in there as well.
And we have, this sits on top, this sits underneath, and you catch all pieces underneath there. And of course, as you can see, we have started to unpick, so that's around there. And when it comes out of the end piece here, this gives you the handle section, and you unpick this off.
You have the lace motifs, the embroidery, and this is a great dragonfly pin, but it's not a pin.
No, it's not. Everybody asks me where I get my little accessories like this. Back home we have $2 shops, nothing over $2. And I also emphasise that you need to train your eye. And these are actually hair clips, and they're just made out of a lightweight metal, and you come and you just cut them off. What
a beautiful combination. Easy sewing, but an elegant project. This quilt, entitled For Norel, incorporates quilting, embroidery, and a new term for most American sewers, broidery purse, a specific applique technique. This heavily embellished quilt is synonymous with 18th century quilts that were heavily embellished with gold threads and hand stitching. You'll enjoy Jenny's quilting techniques that are ever so inspiring. Jenny, this quilt is so lovely to look at, and it's really a expansion on the cushion or pillow that we did in our first segment.
That's right, put into a quilt.
So like the pillow we did earlier, it starts with the center section, added some sashing, and then those 4 blocks have been sewn together. The broidery purse is this applique that we'll detail later, but the first thing we'd like to detail is this satin stitching that is a frame satin stitch. Jenny, you used a very wide satin stitch.
Yes, about a 5.5 millimeter one.
So extremely wide stitch, and then to give it the framed look, you're going to do some highlighting right now.
Yes, I use what we call a triple stitch or a top stitch, and I must mention that when you do such a wide satin stitch that you do need to stabilize it underneath because you are asking the needle to swing widely. Photocopy paper is the best, it tears away and you don't see it. Line your needle up exactly with the edge, the outside or inside edge, whichever, of your satin stitching, and keep your eye on the needle and on that edge, and just let the machine feed for itself as the needle goes backwards and forwards. The beauty about this is that it makes it look like top stitching, and it also highlights the stitch that we're framing it so it looks up like piping.
And you mentioned to me if you have any little hiccups in your thread from the satin stitching, this covers the hiccups.
It does. It gives a straight line on either side.
Now the terminology that I learned yesterday called broidery purse, I looked it up in the dictionary because it was new to me, Jenny, and that is it means a type of embroidery from India. And that's exactly what we are doing. It is an applique, we would call this, or I have called in the past, with some clear thread. You have a chintz fabric, and it's been appliqued on the top with monofilament thread. Now Jenny, again, is using color and fabric, interesting color. She's going to be setting up for this, but also I'd like to have her show you the cutting techniques of pulling out the right roses, whatever detail you're going to do to apply to the top.
We've fused the back of this with a double-sided fusible web. This seals the edges. Now, just because the design is a certain way doesn't mean to say that you have to cut it out exactly the same way. I find that if I don't use the points and then I angle around my flowers, cutting them to suit the shapes that I want, making sure that there is no background fabric showing, because this way it then looks part of the fabric that you're applying it to. And if you have individual leaves, stems or buds, you can cut those out also to make your own design up, as I have done here.
She's used many of the same techniques as those lace motifs we worked with earlier by cutting portions of the applique out, tucking them underneath, not using the fabric exactly as it has been printed onto, or the design as it has been printed on the fabric. I'm going to show you from the flip side how the stitching is done. This rose seems to have it popping right out of the quilt, and as I flip this to the underside, you will see on this beautiful backing, and we have a satin backing. What a wonderful effect. You can see the very tiny little stitches around the edge. Jenny has set up her machine for free motion stitching and ready to just about do the broidery purse.
Yes, what I've done is I've lowered the feed dogs, put my darning foot on, and I have a very small needle, a size 60 needle, as this penetrates the fabric but doesn't split the edges of the applique, and I'm using a monofilament thread.
Now you've already fused down these cabbage roses, but just a quick review on the placement of these, because it's a great idea.
Well, you are being your own designer, so that in cutting out the individual flowers, and we were talking before that this actually came from a basically pink fabric. So I have just taken the neutral coloured flowers out, make your own shapes, and then we are in the halfway position and we're just going around the edges to keep them in place and seal the edges.
So that's a simple technique with the clear thread, the monofilament thread. I'm going to show you again the underside of this quilt. Jenny has used many embroideries, machine embroideries, and you can see then after she put the backing on, then she highlighted, here's a butterfly around the edge. When we go to the right side, you can see how that outline stitching with the clear thread has allowed that motif to kind of pop right out, to have dimension even though it's flat against the fabric. So combining all these great trims, stitching techniques, and fabrics, you have a wonderful 18th century type of quilt. Now that you know Jenny's basic sewing techniques, you could apply it to many projects. And Jenny, here are two more of your lovely rose collections.
One is basic straight stitch and the other is elaborate machine embroidery. Both have been hand beaded.
With laces and embroidery and beautiful fabrics. I've learned a lot from you. I know our viewers have too.
Thank you, Nancy. It has been such a pleasure joining you.
I hope you've enjoyed this program of Sewing with Nancy and will be inspired to try these techniques. Bye for now.
Visit Nancy's website at www.sewingwithnancy.com for more information on this program. Sewing with Nancy has been made possible by grants from the following companies: PFAFF, simply the best European line of sewing machines; Ginger, a tradition of quality in scissors and shears; Madeira threads designed for home and professional embroiderers everywhere; Oxmoor House, publishers of sewing, quilting, and craft books; Prim Dritz, the source for sewing and quilting notions; Amazing Designs by Great Notions, your complete source for machine embroidery; and Nancy's Notions Sewing Catalog, featuring specialty sewing books and notions.